welcome you all in the name of the Interfaith Coalition for Peace and Justice, a group that includes individuals from several faith traditions. We believe in the value and dignity of every human being, and we work together for peace and social justice. Our group believes in the value and dignity of every human being and who works together for peace and social justice. And also we welcome you in the name of Welcoming Michigan, an affiliate of the national grassroots movement Welcoming America, who are also the co-sponsors of this event. We gathered here this evening to welcome the many families who have arrived in our community after fleeing their war-ravaged countries in search of refuge and to secure a better future for their children. Our mission as a community is to assure them of our pledge to be inclusive, respectful, and accommodating. Most relevant to this forum at this time are the families that have arrived from Syria, in which the tragic war continues as we speak. We have 25 Syrian families so far and will receive more in 2017. Millions of refugees fled Syria, seeking safety in Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, Turkey, Europe, and beyond.
Sorry to interrupt, your mic's cutting out. Try again.
According to the United Nations High Commission on Refugees, the number of registered Syrian refugees as of December 4, 2016 is close to 5 million people. The internally displaced inside Syria is over 7 million, according to that source. President Obama vowed to take 10,000 refugees, where a large percentage of them are settled in Michigan because of its large Muslim and Arab community. Even though jurisdiction over refugee resettlement is a federal process, the public commentary by state elected officials does set the tone for the way a society views immigrants and refugees, and it certainly reinforces the fear associated with that population. The negative rhetoric has been harmful for refugees, in particular for the Syrian refugees and the Muslim community. Michigan, being home to a large number of them, has taken several positive steps and measures to combat the negative application of such pronouncements. At the state level, the Michigan New Americans Initiative declares Michigan as a place that values the diversity of its residents, cultures, and faith traditions. It supports an end to the recent actions and rhetoric targeting immigrants and other diverse groups, especially our Muslim American and Mexican American children and adults. Our Kalamazoo community has taken several measures in that direction as well. The Kalamazoo Board of Commissioners passed a resolution on September 1st, 2015, declaring Kalamazoo a welcoming county and signing on to the Welcoming Michigan movement to build immigrant and refugee-friendly communities. The Kalamazoo Muslim community and the Kalamazoo Islamic Center, with collaboration of Welcoming Michigan, presented and passed a resolution at the Kalamazoo City Commission in March 2016, declaring Kalamazoo a city of peace and a welcoming city that stands against Islamophobia. According to the resolution, the Welcoming Kalamazoo initiative aims to build cooperation, respect, and compassion among all in our community, including immigrants and non-immigrants alike, endeavors to create a more inclusive society, and seeks to embrace cultural, religious, and ethnic diversity. The actual mechanism for the refugee resettlement process, once it is referred by the federal agencies to the local communities, is done in our area by two sponsor agencies, Bethany Christian Services, headed by Joe Bell, and Samaritas, previously the Lutheran Social Services, headed by Chris Kavanaugh. The two agencies are assisting in the resettlement of the families, securing their initial basic needs, from locating houses, enlisting children in schools, to job placement, to health care, finding foster families, settling unaccompanied minors, and much more. Their job is made easier by the Kalamazoo vibrant civil society, with its strong sense of humanity and spirit of volunteerism, which has united us as a community behind this common cause. Over the past year, a growing group of people came together and became known as the Kalamazoo Refugee Council, KRC, which is a coalition of Kalamazoo and U.S.-based non-governmental organizations, faith groups and congregations, professors, students, health providers, and well-meaning individuals. They work as co-sponsors with Bethany and Samaritas to help serve and support the refugees. The group meets every other Friday, under the leadership of Pastor Mark Couch at Solid Ground Ministry on the Western Michigan University campus. It is beyond the scope of this presentation to show gratitude and to give enough tribute to this extensive list. To every one of them we say thank you. As we welcome our honored panelists who have so generously agreed to speak on the different aspects that affect this community resettlement efforts, we ask you to hold your questions until the question and answer session at the end, and which would be done in written questions by index cards that will be distributed for your convenience. So now I will turn the microphone to the first of our panelists, Mrs. Susan Reed.
Hi, Shadia. Thank you so much to you, and thank you to everyone for coming. Thank you to the Interfaith Coalition. I am a practicing attorney. I'm the managing attorney at the Michigan Immigrant Rights Center. We are a statewide legal aid nonprofit organization with staff in Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, Ann Arbor, and Detroit. But Kalamazoo is my home. Our work grew out of farm worker advocacy. And Kalamazoo is my home, and I've been working on immigrant and refugee issues for the past 15 years as an attorney. But I have really, for the first time, become a friend, just a friend, to a refugee family since a new refugee family became my neighbors here in Kalamazoo, and they're here tonight. So I'm very pleased to see my dear friends Fatima and Khaled, and I'm so glad that they're part of our community now. Seeing them here really makes me want to set the tone for my remarks that refugee resettlement issues in Kalamazoo are an issue of us now, not an issue of them. And so I think the spirit of this evening is about learning more about who we are together now as a community than it is about finding something out about some others. Refugee law comes from international law, and it's really a treasure of humanity that we had to learn the hard way, coming out of the terrible moral failure in the run-up to World War II, in the run-up to the Holocaust, our terrible moral failure as a nation and as a world to receive Jewish refugees and other refugees fleeing the Holocaust. And so we have an international law that creates a refugee status for individuals who cannot return to their countries because they have a well-founded fear of persecution based on a protected category. It's a very technical legal definition, and you don't get to say really yourself that you're a refugee, or maybe you first do when you vote with your feet for that status when you run. But what happens is that abroad, in most cases, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees determines that an individual meets the international law definition of a refugee. At that point, most refugees still remain in sort of temporary or camp situations near their home country in the hopes that they will be able to return when the threat situation changes. But resettlement, refugee resettlement in a third country is available to those for whom another permanent solution really cannot be found in the near term. So very few of the world's refugees are resettled. When it comes to those who are resettled in the U.S., there is a 12-step security clearance and cultural orientation process that refugees must go through. And it's really an alphabet soup. So a refugee is referred by UNHCR to a resettlement support center run by the Department of State, who compiles a personal data and background file for the security clearance process. Then the security clearance process begins. The names are run through the Consular Lookout and Support System, or CLAS. There are interagency security checks. A security advisory opinion is developed for certain refugees by the State Department. Then refugees who meet the minimum age requirement have their fingerprints taken, and those fingerprints run constantly in the background against many international databases throughout this process, which takes really no less than 1 and typically 2 years, and sometimes longer. Yeah, 18 months is really the lowest amount of time it can take, and it can take much longer. All refugee applicants are interviewed personally by an officer from the Department of Homeland Security. Trained officers travel abroad and conduct a face-to-face interview with each applicant. Based on the information in the file and the interview, a final determination is made about whether the person qualifies as a refugee under U.S. law. Following DHS approval, there is a medical screening, there is a matching with a sponsor agency, such as Bethany Christian Services or Samaritas. There is a cultural orientation offered abroad, and then a second interagency security clearance process begins in some ways all over again, and refugees must clear that check in order to depart. Finally, when a refugee arrives at the front door of the United States, be it at Detroit Metro Airport or another port of entry, there is a final interview with a Customs and Border Protection officer who can still make a determination that some new information has arisen or some concern has been identified before the refugee is approved for admission into the U.S. Now, one question that seems to suddenly be coming up a lot is, does it work? I'm just going to read to you a little tidbit from the Cato Institute, from a Cato Institute study. The Cato Institute, if you're not familiar with it, is one of the most conservative think tanks in the U.S. The Cato Institute finds that of the 859,629 refugees admitted since 2001, only 3 have been convicted of planning terrorist attacks, and those were on targets outside of the U.S., and none was successfully carried out. So that is 1 terrorism planning conviction for every 286,543 refugees that have been admitted. And to put that in perspective, and this is the mind-blowing part, about 1 in every 22,541 Americans committed murder in the year 2014. So that's for 1 terrorism planning conviction for every 286,543 refugees, and 1 murder for every 22,000 Americans in the year 2014 alone. So the Cato Institute concludes that the terrorist threat from Syrian refugees in the United States is, and I quote, hyperbolically over-exaggerated, and we have very little to fear from them because the refugee vetting system is so thorough. I really encourage you to look at Cato's, they do a great deal of in-depth analysis on the statistics and the process. So there is an emerging anti-refugee movement. That's been a really new and distressing development in our work. They are active in Michigan. The group is called Secure Michigan. Tomorrow, our House of Representatives will vote on a resolution, HCR 28, which alleges that the security system is broken, and it alleges that the Refugee Act of 1980's requirements that the refugee agencies consult with local governments is not being complied with. Now we have Vice Mayor Don Cooney here, and we're consulting with him tonight, so we're very grateful to see him. We even have Bingoy from the Michigan Office for New Americans sitting in with us. So local government is represented here tonight. What I want you to understand about those two claims that the anti-refugee movement advances is that, you know, certainly some of you may have come here with concerns, and I don't want you to misunderstand me. Reasonable minds and kind hearts can disagree about the numbers of refugees that a given area might be able to effectively integrate or support. Reasonable minds and kind hearts can disagree about that. But it's very clear when you look deeply at what this rhetoric is about that it's not about the numbers. It's about sending a message that Muslims are intolerable and frightening. And you can see that again and again in the rhetoric that the anti-refugee movement advances. There are 3.3 million American Muslims in our country, and lots of wonderful American Muslims in this room. Here in Michigan, we have a community like Dearborn, which exists as really in many ways a beacon of the kind of peace and prosperity that immigrants in general and refugees in general can bring when allowed to flourish and contribute economically, socially, and culturally. Michigan was the only state to lose in the last census, and refugee skills can really complement some serious gaps in the labor market as our workforce grays and as our workforce changes. There's some great studies that take a look at that. The Global Detroit study is a fantastic piece of research that looked at the impact that immigrants and refugees can have economically in the Detroit region, and there's a lot to learn. I do want to be reminded, so I think as much as there is negative rhetoric, it's an opportunity to be reminded of our humanity and recommit to our values and think about how to invest in the potential of all people, newcomers and those with potential in our communities who have experienced trauma and marginalization. So I think there is opportunity for everyone to think about investing in people. We try to do that work intersectionally at the Michigan Immigrant Rights Center, looking at issues of racial equity and justice for all Michiganders through our Welcoming Michigan initiative, which highlights the contributions and seeks to build community and answer questions about refugees and immigrants. And Megan Roche from our Welcoming Michigan initiative is here and has some good materials for you. But I really want to encourage you to take every opportunity you have to look deeply at the dynamic that's happening in our country and in our state right now, and learn more so that you can connect with your own humanity and defend the humanity of others. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from our other panelists about what it means that refugee resettlement has begun formally in Kalamazoo, when it hasn't, to my knowledge, happened at least in the last few decades. So thank you.
Thank you, Susan. We would like to hear now from Mr. Aram Delbandi, who is the Emeritus Program Coordinator. He's going to share with us his story, his success story as a refugee who came to this country 20 years ago as an immigrant who fled a war-ravaged, bitter fight or war in Iraq. As a Kurd, he was persecuted and he had to flee for his life. He will tell us a story that would leave a positive impact and a hopeful message for the refugees who have moved to our community. Please, Ms. Aram.
Hi everyone, it's a pleasure to be here and see all these spaces. I came about 20 years ago after I was persecuted in my country, and I was a freedom fighter fighting with the Saddam Hussein regime for 10 years. And after I fled my country, I came as a refugee with my family and 2 small kids. I arrived in Lansing Airport knowing nobody, no friend, no relatives. And and not speaking any English. So when I go to appointments, I had to take interpreter with me, going to doctors. And I figured out that I have to, the key to success in my life here, I have to learn English and work hard. So I was working 3 jobs, 1 full-time, 2 part-times, and going to school. So within a year, I learned English, and I went to college, and I am still pursuing my degree in psychology. And about 15 years ago, I found the opportunity for interpreter at Lutheran Social Service of Michigan. You become interpreter there, and as a way to getting back to my community and helping other refugees who come, since I speak about 6 languages, I help in my community in this way. And I continue going to school and working hard, and then I applied to become a citizen. After so many years, I go through the process, and I become proud Kurdish American. And for the first time in my life, I had a chance to vote, and that was very exciting. Many people think about refugees as positively. Some of them, they don't speak positively about refugees. Refugees are the most secure people who come here. If we think about security, somebody may be coming from Europe and they don't require a visa to come to the US. They can just board the plane and come here, and maybe they need harm us too. But refugees, they are the most secure people who enter the US, since they go through a very sensitive security clearance, minimum 18 months. Before I came here, I waited 8 years to come here. So imagine how the other people, how much longer or less they waited in camps and in other places waiting for their resettlement here. Right now, I manage 2 offices, one in Kalamazoo, one in Battle. I helped about 2,000 Kurdish refugees in Battle Creek. And when the crisis started in Syria, I thought about bringing some refugees here, since there is Arab community here in Kalamazoo, but not in Battle Creek. Since October 2015, my office resettled about 241 refugees, 116 from Syria that are in Kalamazoo, about 21 from Africa, 1 from Iran, 1 from Pakistan, 2 from Iraq, and we help them to be successful in their life and start a new life. We help them to maintain their documents, as Social Security card, Michigan ID or driving license. We take care of their medical needs, and help them find a job. All refugees who I work with, they are all eager to work. They don't want to be burdened on government and receiving assistance from government. I have one client, maybe he's here now too. We found him a job before even he received his Social Security card. We were thinking that it's going to come in next week, and by that time you can give them their Social Security card, but it comes a little bit late, and so he had to quit his job until he gets his Social Security card. So all these people, they are very eager to work, very hardworking people, and some of them are very educated. They have a degree in master, PhD, bachelor. Some of them, they are farmers, mechanics, doctors. We have even one, last year, we received one refugee in Michigan who's a scientist. He did a research that he can predict earthquake 2 weeks in advance. So imagine how this person will contribute to our society here in America and in the world in general. Imagine to have 2 weeks notice of earthquake. So refugees are the people who we need to welcome them and not see them as strangers, and they maybe have different faith and different culture, but we need to help them to become part of our society and our community. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'd like to introduce now Sheriff Rick Fuller. Please.
It's recording better.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here tonight, and it's actually very exciting for me. We've not had opportunities to work with refugee communities in the past, and I look forward to this opportunity. You know, I sit here tonight as probably, I'm looking around the room, the only county official to welcome the refugees. So welcome refugees, and welcome everybody that's here to help them. I appreciate that. You know, as a law enforcement official, and I've talked with other law enforcement officials, we recognize that the refugee community is the most vetted non-citizen group of people in our country, meaning that they've already gone through every process that anybody's going to go through before they come to our nation. Now, I'm very interested in reading the Cato Institute's finding. I find that very interesting. I already knew the murder numbers are silly here in the United States, and here's the comparison between any group of refugees being attached to terrorist activities, seeing that it's 1 in 200 and something odd thousand.
286,543.
Compared to the you know, the much closer number to any of us is the one murder for every 22,000 citizens. So again, law enforcement in this community is here to welcome and here to listen and here to help well, we also talk about immigrants that are non-citizens that are here that are often talked about in the news also, that we want everyone to understand that we want to protect everyone that's here. We're not here just for certain groups of people, we're here for everyone. And so it's always cautious for us when we talk about these things. You know, when I say I'm here to protect citizens, well, I mean everyone if they're a citizen or not. They're a citizen of someplace, right? And if they're trying to become a citizen of these United States, that's the same thing to me as a citizen. So back in 2011, it might interest you to know that I had been looking at some of these things in relation to our immigrant population before we even started talking about having refugees in this community. And in 2011, I created a policy that it's referenced bias-based profiling. And I can tell you, I'm not the only law enforcement official that has made sure that these policies are put into place and that they're adhered to. So I just want to read you the purpose that we came up with in 2011 to help in this area. The purpose of this policy or written directive, the purpose of this written directive is to affirm that law enforcement activities that are the result of biased profiling are not condoned, are unacceptable, and will not be tolerated by the Kalamazoo County Sheriff's Office. I felt confident saying that since I'm the sheriff. Bias-based profiling is unethical and illegal and serves to foster distrust of law enforcement by our community. This directive will serve as a guideline for the Kalamazoo County Sheriff's Office personnel to ensure that all persons receive equal protection and their due process under the law. That was important to me, and that's why we put this into a written directive. This written directive, when I talk about this, and you're probably picturing traffic stops and things like that, but it also works in the jail because you might know I also run the jail. And so it's very important to me. It's all laid out. There are even steps where people can complain and if they think there's been a violation, and where ultimately the complaints come straight to me. And so if any of the personnel receive these complaints, they're to investigate it and get it to me as fast as they can. So that's hopefully the message I'm able to give here tonight, is that your law enforcement community is not sitting here afraid of people from foreign lands coming to live here with us or coming to try to become citizens. We recognize, again, that the refugee population is one that is the most vetted, and that we are here to protect everybody. And that's what I'd like to convey.
We would like to take a break right now so we could pass index cards for your questions. So we will take just a couple of minutes.